Recording. Welcome. This is Mels 603 with me and Dr. Sumner and Dr. Barnes. They're with us tonight. This is week 11 already. So let's look at our weekly schedule as we always do. This week we're looking at staff selection, contracts, evaluation, the law, HR websites. This was your reading, teachers' rights, managing human resources, hiring and retention in local LEAs, managing human resources. And so I don't have a lot of materials other than reading materials because none of it is common across districts and across states. And so I took all the old stuff out, and I've intentionally not replaced it. And so I put in to have you folks go and talk with what your district does. Every district is different in terms of how they assess that there is an opening and who advertises, who goes through the resumes and vets those or separates those out by qualification, who does the references, who does the background check, who calls the people in for interviews, what the interview committee consists of, the questions that the interview committee asks, who notifies the person to offer the job, who notifies the people who didn't get the job, who then gets that person to HR to come and fill out all their paperwork and do all their tax forms, who sets up their orientation, who sets up their payroll and all of their benefit sessions, who does their orientation, who does their training. I think I just named 16 different things that is entailed in hiring a new employee in a public school, because of you have to so closely follow EEOC, Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, because schools take federal money. So let me hit on that quickly. Charters and private schools many times do not take federal money. And so I was in conversation with one of our classmates this week who's at a charter school, and she said, but we have EC kids. I said, that money follows them. It doesn't come to it's not school-based money. If you're in a charter or a private, and if there's a question as to whether or not your school takes federal money, what we're talking about is Title I, gifted, free and reduced lunch, AIG, ESL, those services, and CTE. If you have any of those services, mainly it's free and reduced lunch, then you take federal money, and that means that you have to follow Equal Opportunity Employment Commission's guidelines on advertising and hiring faculty and staff. If you do not take federal money, you do not have to follow those. And so the charter school that I was talking with one of our classmates about this week, they just use the commercial website Indeed to hire people. They're not required to vet their references or to do background checks. That comes with EEOC. That has to be done. Now, it's a best practice to do that, and they may do that, but they're not required to do that. So that's why I ask you to go and find out how it works in your district. It's different everywhere. But what is constant is if you, as the school-based administrator, have to do reference and background checks, it is a long and awful process. Trying to track people down for references, trying to do the background check, those kinds of things. So hopefully you're in a district that does all that for you. And then when you get candidates in, they've already been embedded to where if you want to hire them, that you would be able to hire them. There's nothing more frustrating than going through this long process, interviewing candidates, having the team pick the one they want, and them not get through the reference check or the background check. And you have to start all over again. And boy, you got to be real careful not to call the people who didn't get the job and tell them they didn't get it. And then the one you pick, they fall through. And then you've got egg on your face trying to call those people back in. That's a nightmare. Yes.
May I make a small district
Sure.
kind of voice of reason here a little bit too? So often in our smaller districts, as an administrator, you will be the one calling references.
Hmm.
And while yes, it is legally required, I'm dealing with a whole lot of situations where it still wasn't done, or that very important question of would you hire this person if he or she was applying in your school today wasn't asked. So we've got people behaving badly, and it turns out it's a pattern,
Yes.
and people are going to be pretty willing to pass on their dirty laundry if at all possible and not deal with the situation. So those reference checks are so incredibly important,
Hmm.
and we can't just blindly trust if we get a good one that there might not be an ulterior motive. I just think that's worth the time.
Yeah, and so
On the
that's
front
why
end.
excellent point, and that's why I believe that that you should background check people, not just reference check, but background check people before you even interview them, because many times the person that's got them will not tell you the truth. Uh, and that's why I was just to your point. I believe that I would not interview anybody that I had not reference checked and background checked. The background checks where you find the bad stuff, and it's out there. But there's so many people who will tell you, yeah, I'd hire them back. I know no reason why you shouldn't hire them. And then when you get them, you find out that it's a pattern of behavior. Um, I was at lunch today. It's not exactly the same thing, but it's the same. The story is the same. And one of the fellows I have lunch with regularly, um, his role at the university, he's a VP for something. I know, but I won't say. But one of his roles is he is tasked with doing investigations of student misconduct. And so he said they had some more witnesses coming in this afternoon, and they were doing this misconduct investigation and of a student athlete. And he said since he's been here, he read a laundry list or mentioned a laundry list of things. And I said to him, "Do you think he just went bad after he got here?" He said, "Oh no." I said, "Don't you think that people knew that about him?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Now let's think about this. You're hiring him. In effect, you're hiring a football player gets a full scholarship. That's $47,000 a year. He's getting $47,000 a year. You're paying him a salary of $47,000. Don't you think you should background check some of these people before you get them, especially some that are much better players than we normally get? Do you not think that there might have been a reason that some of the bigger Division I schools passed on this person?" "Well, yeah." I said, "Do y'all have any plans to do that?" "Well, no." I said, "Well, then don't complain about all the stuff that's going on, the problems that you're having then. I would, if I was paying somebody $47,000 a year, I'd be background checking them. I know all the biggest colleges do that. The smart ones do it as well, no matter what size they are, because the coach is not the coach is going to give you the reference. Oh, he's great. He's not going to tell you that, oh, by the way, he ought to be busting rocks, making little ones out of big ones over at the local penitentiary. He's not going to tell you that. But a $250 background check will tell you that on these people. It's the same way with employees. I had a fellow that worked for me at Eastway a long time ago. I really liked him a lot, but he had a drinking problem. And I remember when the Panthers came to town, the first Sunday ball game, he called me. He didn't show up to work Monday. He called me about 11 o'clock Monday morning from the drunk tank over to jail. Come get him out. He climbed up on the Panther out front on the stadium. And he was a great guy. And if you met him, he was charismatic. People would hire him in a minute just talking with him and all that. But the problem was he was an alcoholic. And when he'd get on a bender, oh my Lord, he didn't stop until he got locked up. And I had to let him go. I let him go. He got where, he got on the drunk one more time. And the second time he got on the drunk, I said, "Can't help you anymore, Frank. I'm gonna have to let you go." And he said, "Will you give me a good reference?" And I said, "No, Frank, I won't. I'm sorry, I can't do that." And I said, "Now, the best thing for you to do is not have them send me a reference, because I can't do that. I'm not going to take the legal liability of putting you on somebody else. You're a coach, PE teacher out driving an activity bus, you drunk and wreck a bus load of kids or something. They'd be hunting me down." And so you just don't know what you're getting nowadays. I've told the story. I had a fraternity brother. I guess it's former now. He's excommunicated me because I wouldn't pull strings to get his daughter hired. He called me and said, "I can't figure." After 30 years, it was 30 years. We've been out of school for 30 years at that time. I was still in Charlotte. Called me and said, "I don't understand why my daughter can't get hired there. So she can't even get an interview." I said, "I don't know. I'll find out, Eric." I went over to the police department. They said she's hell on wheels. Said she's been arrested, drug charges, assaulted the police, public drunkenness, DUI. I said, "Oh my Lord." Said, she's just, she's a menace to society. And I called her. "I thought you said that." "Oh, those just useful indiscretions." I said, "Assault on police?" I said, if you hadn't been a really good attorney, she'd be in jail now. I mean, they prayed, she had like 6 prayer for judgments. I said, they prayed for her more than they have for me. We can't hire her. But see, people won't tell you the truth. That's the thing you have to remember about all this. People won't tell you the truth. I believe that it's worth the time and the money to do background checks.
So, Dr. Lamb, to add to that, we in our large district, we have an entire department that's their job. But when the former superintendent came on board, as you all well know now, because it's in the paper, one of the reasons that our board was able to dismiss him was because he stopped the fingerprinting part of our background checks. And so, needless to say, with the new superintendent, now all of those people that were hired in the last couple of years, they have to go back and do printing and the background checks, et cetera. So, like you said, we had some serious indiscretions that took place with that piece of that was missing at the time.
Absolutely. And his excuse was, "Oh, we were going to have that policy changed anyway." What do you mean we? You're not part of the policy-making body there. That would be the Board of Education. You're just the secretary to the board. You're not a voting member. What do you mean we were going to have that changed? The board, there was not one person on that board as an elected official that has to go back in front of the voters who was going to say, "Oh, by the way, we're going to quit doing background checks and fingerprinting people." That's a really good, you know what would happen? That'd be the first thing that their opponent in the election would seize upon, is they're going to let felons and child molesters be in there with your children. Oh, that's a loser. There's no way that an elected official would ever come out and say, "Yeah, I support that policy." They might not put it in, but they definitely not going to take it out once it's already in there. I don't know what he was thinking. I've heard rumor that this was in order to let some people in that might have had questionable backgrounds. I don't know. I don't think, I mean, it was already in place. I don't see, and the money was there. I don't see why it was a money issue. But yes, every one of those people should be fingerprinted. They should go back on every one of those people. Absolutely. You can't, I've told you, you get on the news cycle and you can't get off. Somebody has to go home. You hire somebody that turns out to be a pedophile, child molester, or a felon of some sort. You hire them and the public finds out. Your hide won't hold shucks, especially in small towns. You won't survive that. One of the things I really liked, having worked in 4 districts in my career, 2 large, 2 small, what I really liked about working in Charlotte-Mecklenburg is that somebody else had that responsibility, that we had people in place who did that. The interviewing process was aggravating enough, but at least once they sent you somebody, they were hireable. They They might not have been much more than just breathing, but at least you could hire them. I remember I asked one fellow one time if he wore a chicken suit. When he said no, I said, "You're hired." That's absolutely a true story. But that was kind of my background check of my own. I had a candidate came in, Gene Kidd, loved Gene, was Judy's husband. And he said that, and he was very qualified for the job. But then he said something during the interview that triggered, that triggered my thought process. He said he was a big supporter of the Charlotte Checkers. Now, this was the first iteration, the Carl Shearer iteration that was at Bojangles. They've now gone back after 30 years, but this was 25, 26 years ago when they were out at Bojangles Coliseum, the old original Charlotte Coliseum on Independence Boulevard, the first time. And they used to have the chicken dance, and they had all those people that would come out on the ice and intermission and dance and wear chicken suits and get all drunked up. Well, the junior high where I was principal, that's what our booster club did to raise money every year, was they worked the concession stand they called it the Big I then, at the old Charlotte Coliseum during those hockey games. And I thought, oh Lord, if you're one of those guys that goes out there every week and gets drunk and fights in the stands, the parents will know that, and they'll kill me for having hired one of these nitwits. I mean, they go out and dance on the ice, wear chicken costumes, and do all this. Y'all seen the chicken dance? And I was like, holy crap! I better find. And so I asked him. I said, "Are you one of those people?" He said, "No, I don't do that." He said, "But I am a big supporter, but I'm not one of those people." I said, "Well, I can hire you then. But now, if I find out differently, I'm gonna have to let you go." I said, "I can't stand the public backlash. If these parents know that you're one of those people out there every week, I can't take that heat." And so, again, those background kind of things matter, and you better be you got to do those things. And so, there's a long litany of things that I mentioned a few minutes ago, about 16 different parts and moving pieces to this. You better know who's responsible for what in your district, because when something goes bad, everybody's going to be looking for somebody to blame. Now, the second piece of this is interview an administrator concerning employee assistant compensation plans and benefits. And you see the responses that most of you have turned this in this week. You need to know the general things that you can answer general questions, but specific questions, it's more important to know who to refer people to. And because people get really emotional and angry about their benefits, their compensation, their pay, their insurance, their retirement, those kinds of things are very personal to people. And even though you may not be in charge of them, it's kind of tone deaf to tell people, "I don't really care about that, not my problem." It is your problem. You need to know about those things. Now, employee assistance. Now, that if your district has an employee assistance, you better know what services they offer, because that will affect the job actions that you can take against a teacher. I inherited a person who was a drug addict, a known drug addict in a school. She was hired knowing she was, and the reason why she was hired, she was supposed to be a recovering addict, and she was hired for a program that we used to have in Charlotte called Project Success. And she was to be a role model kind of person with Project Success, that look how this person has changed their life. Except she relapsed shortly after I got there, and I started having problems, and I took her to get her drug tested, and she, of course, failed. But because we had an employee assistance program there in the district, she had certain rights, and so she was suspended for 6 months the first time, but she could not be terminated. She had to actually violate the policy 3 times before we could move on from her. Now, what I wanted was for them to get her some rehabilitation help, and they did. She went to rehab 2 stints, but she still couldn't stay clean, and so we had to move on from her. But that's the worst case scenario. But there's mental health counseling. There can be psychological there's all different kinds of employee assistance. Sometimes anger management, conflict management. I had an intern. I actually had a clinical intern at one of the Southwest elementary schools that got into a big argument with the parent and slapped the parent. And so, but they couldn't fire her because employee assistant, they sent her to anger management. You need to know those kinds of things, what is offered in your district, what protections the people in your district have. Those are not consistent through all districts. Those have been kind of negotiated and won by different teacher organizations over the years. A lot of the small districts don't have any of those things. You need to find out what your district has, because that will affect what, whether you can write a teacher up, whether you can suspend a teacher, whether you can, wither without pay, whether you can terminate, all those kinds of things that you don't ever really want to have to do, but sometimes you have to do. You better make sure you know what your options are. So that's why you have to do that. And again, I used to have some guides that go with this. Dr. Church up in Caldwell County got some of those things from him, but it ended up that none of them were ever relevant. And it changes from year to year. Just like Dr. Barnes just pointed out, it was one way in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, then for 2 years it wasn't, and now it's back again. You need to find out year to year what's going on in your district. So that's what those are. What I want to spend a little time on tonight, and I'm actually a minute or so early, I want to kick off the budget tonight, talking about budget laws. What I have done for you, and this is under week 11, I have pulled the things from the state law that pertains to how you have to handle money in school. I hate to be redundant all the time, but this is about your job. If you handle the money wrong, things will go badly. So I'm going to kick off with these budget laws tonight. And then after I go through the laws, I'm going to go through a series of policies. The policies are just an exemplar. You will have the exact same in your district. They'll just be numbered differently, but pretty much you'll have the same policies, board policies in your district. And so I'm using these as an exemplar. But the budget laws are consistent now. I went to the articles in South Carolina, as they call them. They're pretty much the same there as well. And so let's start through the budget, talking about money tonight. First thing is the principal shall maintain a copy of the school's current budget. And you know that I've asked you to look to see if all four on their budget, all four sources of revenue for that budget. Federal money, state money, local money, that's county money, and then local school money that's been raised there at the local school level. Now, many times every semester I have one of our students, one of our classmates get in touch with me and say our principal does not provide a copy, says the budget is not public information. And I asked them, are you at a public school? And they say yes. And I said, well, yes, they do. It says clearly that any parents or other interested persons are allowed to review and obtain your budget according to Chapter 132 of the General Statutes of North Carolina. So budgets are public information documents. So now, let me explain to you how state money comes. We've already had the Leandro case. I had to wait till we got through Leandro to go through this. Now, you know that the state allots money per pupil to the school district that comes down to the school level. We're going to use the figure of $7,000. It's about that much. State allots $7,000. Now, that money cannot be manipulated. That money has to go to that school for that student. Now, local money can be manipulated, but not that state money and not federal money. That $7,000 has got to go to that student, except it's not $7,000. Therein lies the problem. That $7,000 comes to the district in monthly installments. That's $438. And so The LEA gets their money every month. The LEA has to have enough money to operate the first month of school, the first 20 school days. They have to have enough money, available money, account the fund balance in order to fund the first month of school. At the end of the first month of school, they send 2 reports to the state, and the state sends them the money back. But they don't send the $7,000. They send 700. They divide that 7,000 by the 10 months of school. And once you send them the principal's monthly report and the school activity report, and they're both legal and verified, then they'll send you your money, 1/10 of it, enough to pay off, to put it back, so that you can pay your next month, put it in your bank account and pay your next month's bill. Now, what are those 2 reports that you have to send them? The principal's monthly report is attendance taken in Power School. That's why it's so important, because whatever percentage of absenteeism you have, they subtract that from the $700 that month. So if your district attendance level is 95%, you only get the 95% of that $700 for every pupil that you have. Let's say you've got 100 people times $7,000, that's $700,000. Divide that by 10 months, that's $70,000. And if you only have 95% attendance, you get 7 times 5 is 35. They take $3,500 off the top of that. So you get 66.5 that month for those 100 students, rather than 70,000. You get 66,500. They subtract the kids who don't show up every day. So you don't get paid from the state. The state money does not flow to you based on how many students are enrolled. It flows to you based on how many show up every day. Average daily membership, ADM, average daily membership, and that report is called the PMR, the principal's monthly report. So that's the first thing has to go. They have to calculate how much they're going to have to pay you. Now, before they pay you, they have to see the second report that you have to send them, called the SAR, the school activity report. You know what that is? Your master schedule. You have to send them a copy of your master schedule every month. It is digital now. It is in Power School. They have to see your master schedule every month. And what they check for is class size, teacher certification, and highly qualified. If you don't meet the standards, they don't send you the money. You got 40 kids in an English class rather than the allowable 31, the 28 plus the 10% overage of 31. If you've got 40 in there, until you get that fixed, they don't send you your money. So those are the 2 reports. So money comes in monthly installments, and the school finance officer, that's the assistant superintendent for finance, or the CFO, has to tell the state board that the money, we spent this money this month and it was all allowable expenditures. Give us, disperse our money back to us. Give us our money now. So it's a voucher system. They don't send you the money, you spend it. You spend your money, they reimburse you. So you're always in a deficit situation where you can't just say, well, I'll do what I want to. I'll spend this money ever how I want to. They've always got you over a barrel. They only reimburse if the charges were legitimate. If you spent money on a way that you weren't allowed to spend it, they won't reimburse it. So that's the modified accrual counting system that works in North and South Carolina for flat grant funding. You get the absenteeism hurts you, it's subtracted from the money you get. You only get it in monthly installments. You only get it if your master schedule is legal. If you'll remember, first night of class, I told you, my job is to teach you to build a master schedule duty roster and supervision schedule that are legal. The reason why your master schedule has to be legal, if it's not, the state won't give you any money. If your supervision schedule and your duty roster are not legal, you'll lose when you go to court. But in order to keep the money coming to your school every month, you have to have a legal master schedule. And that's what we're talking about. Federal law comes first, then state law. State law governs class size, length of class, duty-free time, planning periods, all that stuff, how many days, how many hours during the day, all that stuff, if you'll remember, legal requirements for planning time, for scheduling that document, that's so you will have a legal master schedule so you can get your money. If that SAR is out of order, you will not get your money. All right. You have to maintain accounting procedures, which means that you have to keep, assets and liabilities in your ledger, equities, revenues, and expenditures. All those, you have to make sure you conform with the rules of the modified accrual basis of accounting, because that's what the state uses. All right. The state law says you will deposit all collections and receipts daily. You will not carry money over. So even after the ball game late on Friday night, when you you have to sell tickets. You have to have a ticket for every money dollar you take in an athletic contest. And then there has to be a reconciliation of tickets and money. And once that's done, that money has to be night deposited. Your resource officer goes with the person who's in charge of the gate collections and has to deposit that money Friday night. That money cannot go home with that person. That money can't be locked up in the school. Monies collected every day must be receipted in the office by the financial secretary every day. Can't take it home with you, even if you're in charge of the fundraiser. Can't take it home with you. Can't leave it locked up in your desk or in your office. All monies have to be receipted daily. That's state law, North and South Carolina. There's also policies on that as well. And then every year you're going to get an audit every year to make sure that you haven't spent money in any way that you're not supposed to, that all 4 of your accounts, that you have spent them legally and properly. You have to produce all books and records every year. And if you in any way attempt to conceal, falsify, or run in 2 sets of books or whatever, that's a class 1 misdemeanor, which means you'll lose your license. And if they find out that you took the money, they'll put you in jail. All right. Every school's got to have a treasurer. That would be your financial secretary. That person's in charge of funds. And so it means there's 2 signatures on all checks that you sign from either one or both of your school accounts. Now, secondary schools a lot of times have 2 local accounts. One of them is their general fund. The other is their special funds, like for athletics, that they can write checks out of, booster club or whatever. But regardless of how many accounts you got at school, all school checks have to have 2 signatures. Your financial secretary, who is your school treasurer, and the principal has to sign each check that goes out the door. Now, time for a story as always. Dr. Robertson, he's I don't know if any of him was your CC1. Dr. Mark Robertson worked in Charlotte, retired. One of his former APs made principal. Tragically, she, I guess tragic. She wasn't killed, but she was hurt pretty badly right at the beginning of the school year a few years back. She was in the hospital for quite a while. When she got back, it was discovered that her financial secretary had stole a bunch of money, had wrote checks, forged her name. Investigation, and she ended up being demoted. And people said, well, that's kind of harsh. She wasn't even there. The investigation found that after she got back, she had not sat down with the bookkeeper and done any kind of audit of what had happened while she was gone. And so when the auditor showed up in spring, all the money was missing. And so because she didn't take it and because she was out, it kept her from completely losing her job. But she became a cautionary tale on failure to maintain fiscal control and responsibility. Her first job when she came back on campus should have been to check the books. She did not. And so it was a number of months before it was discovered that the financial secretary had made off with all the money in her absence, had forged the checks, and all the money was gone. And so was the financial secretary. When it came to time, the day for the audit, that morning when the auditor was coming, the financial secretary didn't show up either, and all the money was gone. And that had been quite a while since the principal had been back on the job. So I hear, I work with Dr. Laws. We co-teach this course in 601 for the EDCI doctorals. And he talked, your best friend on campus better be your financial secretary when you're a principal. I don't know that I want or need for that person to be my friend, but I need to check on them regularly. I need to make sure. I need to be watching what's going on with those books, because although they'll get after her, they will remove you as well. And that kind of leads us to fundraising, and we're going to talk about that. We'll go, but I'm going to kind of go into that fundraising. For some reason, folks think that when you delegate fundraising to some group, some parent group, booster club, band boosters, PTO, PTA, they think the initials matter. None of that matters. You can delegate the activity, but not the responsibility. If they abscond with the money, it's on you. If they can't account for the money, that's on you. All fundraising, the responsibility comes back to you. And so, again, that's failure to maintain fiscal control and accountability. That's what they'll get you on. And so I've seen parent groups, and you have too, the PTA president abscond with the money. It happens every week. Somebody's in the news for that. You know that. But now, you're held accountable for those kinds of things. So what needs to happen is, okay, PTA, you're going to run the, whatever this fundraiser is, but you're going to bring your receipts in here and turn them into the financial secretary daily. We're going to handle the money. Y'all handle the activity. We're going to handle the money. It's just that simple. And if they say, well, we don't want to do that, well, then why would you want to do fundraising then? We handle the money, you handle the activity. And if you don't want to do it that way, then we don't need to be running that fundraiser anyway. You have a lot of groups, especially in high school, booster clubs and parent groups around the band, the chorus, your dance troops, your step clubs, all your athletic boosters. There's a lot of good parents out there who will do a lot of good work for you, and we need that work. But we need to be control. We need control of the money, and so you need to understand that if they make off with the money, that's going to be on you. Your special funds, that's what we're talking about. Gate receipts, competitions, sale of school annuals, newspapers, all that goes into a separate account, separate from your general fund in secondary schools, all of those kinds of things. So you're going to have two different accounts at your school level. It's your job to keep school buildings in good repair. But why I have this in here is, if you let people use your facilities and not pay, that's a violation, a financial violation, because the wear and tear and them tearing it up and not having a community use contract. But they'll get you on the financial piece if you let people use your school or tear your school up and you don't have any kind of a contract, or if you let students tear your place up, you can be held accountable for that. Please remember, it says boards of educations and tax levying authorities. They have to safeguard that money. Please remember that your board of education is unempowered. They don't levy taxes. That's the tax levying authority. That's either your town commissioners or your town council or your county commissioners that actually fund schools. And so there is a legal responsibility that you be a good steward of that money that they gave you. And so if you are not, that's failure to maintain fiscal control and accountability again. If you let groups use your school without paying, or if you let students or other groups tear up your facilities, then they're going to hold you accountable for that as well. You have to maintain the proper discipline of pupils, and you will be held, principal or teacher will be held responsible for the damage. What's talking about? Failure to maintain fiscal control again. If you cost money, then they're going to be after you. Now, the story that I tell, and I'm watching my time, is this one was a truly tragic story. And I'll use a name on this one, Jerry Winklejohn. I interviewed Jerry as an assistant principal, and I wasn't able to hire him. He took a job elsewhere, but we played golf a little bit and remained close. And I knew he was going to be a principal pretty quick. And he got the principalship at Ranson Middle School. And the reason I knew he was going to get a job pretty quick because I was high school principal, but I was on the middle school hiring committee. So we recommended Jerry, and Jerry got the job. And Jerry was still late 30s, young. You know, you think you're still young when you're late 30s. He belonged to a flag football league, and he let them come to Ranson and use the ball field on the weekend, and he participated with them. And one Saturday afternoon when they were having their game, he dove for a ball, landed awkwardly and broke his neck and became a quadriplegic, paralyzed from the nose down. Here's the problem. They hadn't filled out a community use of schools contract with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. That wasn't a school activity, wasn't covered under community use of schools, no insurance, no workman's comp. You know, Blue Cross Blue Shield runs out pretty quickly, especially in something that, catastrophic. The district modified the building and had him come back in the wheelchair and tried to work some. And of course he wasn't physically able, but he couldn't retire, wasn't old enough, and didn't have any benefits in terms of workman's comp. There was no insurance. It was devastating financial because there was no contract with the school district, wasn't covered with their insurance. Just one of those freak kind of things. It was bad that it was him, but it would have still been bad on him if it'd been somebody else that had been injured and he had let them be on the fields without a contract. And so you never know when bad things are going to happen. And so you've got to make sure that you maintain fiscal control of your facilities as well. All right, so now these are the board policies that I was talking about. This is the policies that go along with the financial piece. Obviously, this is Charlotte-Mecklenburg, but you will have similar ones in your LEA. There'll be a policy on fundraising, and that's why I said that was one of our earlier ones. Find out what the fundraising rules in your district are. Know that you're still going to be responsible for the financial control of that, the fiscal control. But what is the policy on fundraising? Can you do it? Can you not do it? What can you sell? When can you? Who do you have to get it approved by? And there will be a policy in your policy manual on fundraising, and I think all of you found those. And there'll be some ideas like, you can't use instructional time, can't trade state dollars for school dollars. Now, what that means is this: who pays teacher salaries? The state. We can't have teachers raising money for you so that you can have some money in your local bank account to spend on what you want, but the state's paying for your help. They don't like that. The state pays those teachers to teach every day, not to raise money for you for money that you have control of. That's not allowable. You can't take instructional time that when the state is paying teachers salaries, you can't take their time and then convert it into dollars for you. They really get angry when you do that. And your CTE, auto mechanics, tailoring, cosmetology should not be used for fundraising. There can be some nominal charges to offset costs, but you can't be using those things. Why not? Because that's trading federal dollars for some local dollars. Who pays for auto mechanics, tailoring, cosmetology? Those are all CTE classes, career and technical education. Who pays those teachers' salaries? That would be the federal government. They don't like it when you use their help to raise money for you either. So you have to make sure you don't do that. Understanding that teacher salaries are either paid by the federal government for CTE or for the state government. In that $7,000 per pupil, that goes to pay teachers, majority of it teacher salaries. They don't allow you to use them to raise money for your local school. Numbered tickets, as I told you, you're supposed to pre-number tickets and sell those at ball games. If you got a gate, you're supposed to have a ticket and do a reconciliation. The number of tickets has to match the number of the amount of money that you take. And there's a ticket seller report. Most all districts have this proviso in their local board policy because the state says you have to do this. Remember, this was one of those state laws. And then you have to receipt that money and turn it in every night. See, it has to be placed in a night depository for safekeeping until the next working day. So Monday, you go back to the night depository, pull it back out, and count it on Monday. But it has to be put in that night depository overnight, Friday night, so it can be there Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday, and be there Monday. In no case shall money be left at school or taken home. All receipts every day. All funds raised shall be used to benefit the school program. All funds shall be used for projects designated prior to the fundraising. You have to get the project approved, what you're going to use the money for before you start. These things are prohibited. Soliciting or selling any non-school authorized item during work or any work area, selling, distributing, or dealing in instructional supplies, equipment, or reference books. Can't sell those. You can't tutor for compensation students for whom they regularly teach. So if Johnny's in your class, you can't tutor him for money. And then you have to get permission if it's going to be another kid in your school. You can't solicit customers or clients, engage any private business. You can't be running a consulting business. You can't be selling real estate. You can't be selling Maybelline or Avon or any of that. You're not supposed to bring stuff home from your kids' fundraisers at their school and to the school. None of those things are legal in the building. And you have to monitor that kind of stuff when you're the principal. So these are the financial laws of how it works. And again, here are the laws straight out of the general statutes. If you want to read those, I've skipped over a few that are a little more arcane. But then, more importantly, look at the board policies in your district, especially via fundraising is where you always get in trouble with the money. Always. Just as sure as my hair's not going to grow back, somebody's going to get in trouble tomorrow over fundraising in a school somewhere. It happens every day. Fundraising is the bane of our existence. So you need to find out, and that's why I had you do that, what the policy is in your district on fundraising, and make sure that you understand there's state laws behind all those policies as well. And if something goes wrong on that, they have zero. The people at the central office have zero sense of humor about dollars being misappropriated or spent incorrectly or not being accounted for. The law is the law. Money, you can't argue that. The public will forgive you a lot of things, but not the money. And so that and sexual misconduct it will, just a hint of that and you're gone. All right, so that kind of sets up where we'll go for the rest of the semester here. We're winding down. Next week, we're going to talk about facilities, a little more about budget. Your responsibility, some of you have already done it, is to interview an administrator at your school about fundraising. What's the policies on fundraising in your district? What does your school do? How do they handle it? That's why I wanted to cover this tonight. Make sure you know the ins and outs of how it works. Most of you have already done your assessment inventory. You're doing real well. One came in today that scares me. They got cars and buses in the same place. That's never a good one. And then the week after next, 2 weeks, we have our case study for our last one, and I'll talk more about it in the next couple of weeks. And then Thanksgiving, we won't have one obviously on Thanksgiving week, and then our last 2 weeks, we'll talk about resources and management. And then our last one, we'll spend the night on sexual harassment because that has become, unfortunately, a day-to-day issue in schools and in most large organizations with any amount of employees. Sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, sexual misbehavior, all those things, that's become a big thing. I don't know what's the count, either 2 or 3 executives at was it Coca-Cola or Pepsi? Which one of the big companies this week? The CEO had to resign. Oh, I think it was McDonald's. McDonald's CEO had to resign, and another person. I think they got 2, and I heard another one today. So they've cleaned 3 of them out this week over misbehavior. The public and companies have no tolerance for that stuff now. Unfortunately, it's become real big. It's unfortunate not that we're dealing with it. It's unfortunate it's still happening in 2020. That's what's unfortunate. So that will be our agenda. So we've got 1, 2, 3 more classes and 1 case study, and then we'll wrap it up for the season. Anybody have any questions on anything that we've covered tonight? I know y'all get tired of hearing me just drone on and on. We got to work through this stuff. It's not, we get some nights we can, when we do our case studies, they're kind of collaborative and we get to talk and we can, but some of this stuff you just have to grind through it, folks. I mean, law is not a laugh a minute, unfortunately. I can't make it pleasant or pleasing. It's just tough work. You just have to work through it. So if nobody has anything else, Dr. Barnes, Dr. Sumner, anybody have a benediction tonight? All right, well, then I'll close this out then. Know your money. In the school business, know who's spending it, what they're spending it on, how you're getting it, where it's supposed to go. You've got to know your money in the school business. I will see you all next week. Everybody have a good week. Thank you for joining me tonight.